We are back for the final week of Q2 2023. We had a brief military coup over in Russia. That could have made things a little bit more interesting, but I guess they decided, nah, we're going to save that for another time. We're going to dive into that. We're going to look ahead at some of the market moving news this coming week. Before we get going, hit that like button down below, subscribe to our channel. Nothing Kevin or I says is financial advice. We are not financial advisors. We're a few guys who love following the markets. So please do all of your own research before making any buys or sells. Kevin, you're still out there on the houseboat. The seas seem a little more calm today. How are you feeling heading into the final week of Q2?
Yeah, I feel pretty safe from all geopolitical conflicts in this boathouse right now. So, going to Q2, I'm grateful to be here. It seems like it's like a safe haven from a lot of the world. But yeah, this is the end of Q2. We've had a pretty amazing Q1 and Q2 if we look at the markets, right? Both for Bitcoin, for like crypto, and for TradFi. You can't knock it down.
Well, we can say for TradFi, but really just for like 7 stocks in TradFi. I believe
that's a good point. Yeah.
As of Friday, the S&P 500, some people are not calling it the S&P 493 because if you take out the 7 highest performing ones, the rest of the S&P is flat for the year, which is pretty wild. Like if you look at the S&P on the year, right now it is up in total. If we include everything, it's up like 15%. But if you strip out, the big 7 at this point, it's flat. So that is not a great look. That does not instill a ton of confidence heading into the back part of the year. So we'll get into the monthly close on Friday. We'll kind of take our winners and losers for the first half of the year and kind of give our thoughts on the back half. But yeah, it's still a very interesting time in the markets. Crypto has remained pretty calm this weekend. There hasn't been, there was no Friday evening dump like we saw a few weeks ago. We saw a little bit of volatility with the news in Russia. There was some expectation of, when the markets open Monday, oil prices would be skyrocketing and everything else would be dumping. It appears like that's not going to be the case at this point in time. We don't get too much into like geopolitics stuff, but it is interesting to talk about. We saw the U.S. come out and say that they don't support Taiwan independence from China. That seems to be backtracking a little bit, trying to ease some tensions there, maybe get China to help bring an end to this conflict in Russia. It's scary, man, because Putin is such a wild card. Like I want him gone, and then I'm also like, well, if he gets backed into a corner by these guys and he starts sending nukes, that's like the absolute obvious worst case scenario possible. So it's really scary. A peaceful end to this seems unlikely, but obviously the preferred outcome.
All revolutions end where they begin. That's the unfortunate truth of the world. So, I mean, whether he's gone or not, we're going to be in the same situation for years to come. But it is interesting how this is going to definitely affect markets, right? I definitely thought that this was going to be the reason for spiking inflation when I started seeing some of this, because I went to bed and I started seeing a lot of the Russian news come out, obviously, because they're way ahead of us in time. Woke up and I saw that obviously they had been moving towards Moscow. And then, a few hours later, I was at work. It's like, oh, no, we're just going to head back now. We're going to go to Belarus for a few years. We'll see you guys later. But it's kind of funny because definitely this would have affected oil prices, right? I think Qatar's, I forget who it was, but the nation of Qatar, or someone in their nation was talking about how this is going to affect prices for energy and, a lot of other supplies going forward. And in a way, it was a perfect example for, the United States. If anything bad were to happen, like, inflation were to spike or anything like that, Biden's done it before. He could have blamed Putin for, a spike in inflation, right? He did it back when the war began. I wouldn't be surprised if that would have been something if, say, the markets absolutely collapsed. They would have given, probable cause for why we're seeing, a downturn during a presidential year. So it's really interesting to see how these things do play out. And again, how it is going to affect markets, because 100% will. This week, we're also going to talk about, the El Nino year, which is, again, something that's going to definitely affect markets. I believe that. I think you believe that as well. And it's just like, outside of the markets, there are things that do come into account. And this could have potentially been a big one. Maybe it still is. We don't know. But, obviously we have to take information as it comes. Don't necessarily believe everything you see right off the bat. Don't overreact, because markets are irrational. And that tends to be the way most people lose their money, right?
Yeah, acting out of emotion when it comes to the markets and most parts of life, but we'll stick to the markets, is not a good thing. So this week ahead, we have, the big day is Friday, but we do have some other data and, Fed speakers talking before that. Tuesday, we get new home sale data. Wednesday should be a good one with retail and wholesale inventories, kind of seeing the health of the consumer. Where's demand right now? As we keep talking about the potential for stagflation, and we will get into that further down the road this week when we discuss the El Nino and how that could impact the global economy. So wholesale inventories is going to be interesting to watch. Thursday, we get initial jobless claims again. We get pending home sales. Wednesday and Thursday, Jerome Powell is speaking. I can't imagine it's going to be any different than what he said last week in front of Congress and the Senate. It's just the same thing. Is we're going to be data dependent, and we're expecting 2 more rate hikes. And I think the market is beginning to price in those 2 rate hikes. We currently see about a 70% chance of a rate hike in July if you look at the Fed funds rate probabilities. And then Friday, like I said, the big one: personal income, personal spending, PCE, and core PCE, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. So that is definitely going to move that probability of a rate hike in July, in September. The markets, the bond markets have now removed their probability of there being any rate cut this year. Finally, like, it only took them, halfway through the year to realize that the Fed wasn't joking around about that. So we will have those data points coming out that should provide some movement in the markets. Kevin, what are you looking at this coming week? How are you feeling as we close out Q2? It's like we said at the top, it's been solid for crypto. Bitcoin has had a good year lately on the back of all of this institutional money coming in, the first ETF getting approved, for the first spot ETF being approved. So, I think there is an institutional movement coming into crypto slowly. I don't know if it's going to be all at once, but, what are you looking at from the crypto side of things right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to be looking at. Obviously, I want to see Q2 end, mainly because it's going to dictate how I feel going into Q3. I personally, again, I'm bearish as could be, but I can't knock the fact that we've seen a lot of invalidations and patterns, right? We've definitely seen invalidation in Bitcoin. I was talking about a head and shoulders. Now I'm not seeing the head and shoulders in the Bitcoin charts, but I'm seeing it now in the total market cap. So a lot of things have just been shifting over from one asset to another, and not necessarily has it been more bullish, but in fact, it's been more bearish, but a lot less for Bitcoin and more so for a lot of alts. Obviously, I'm still bearish on Bitcoin, but I think the alts are just the ones that are going to be absolutely decimated going into Q3, Q4. And that's because of some of the structures and patterns that we've been seeing. And some of the, again, I always say manipulation, but it's manipulative market. And there's a lot of what seems to be manipulation going on. We look at some of the charts of, some of these stable coins, then you match it up with the price of a lot of these, Bitcoin, some of these alts. And it's like, I don't believe in coincidence. I think that's the point I'm getting at. So, so I'm definitely keeping an eye on seeing how the price just closes out for this month and also for Q2 going into Q3. But I don't really have any expectations how this is going to close. I'm bearish because I think we've just put in so much strength in the first half of the year. I think that we're due for a cool down. Whether that cool down is a major continuation of what we saw back in 2022, that remains to be seen. And maybe this entire half of the year has been a correction. And maybe this is what leads us into the recession, the second technical recession that I've been calling for, you've been calling for. I think this could be our potential double dip recession. But again, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I know where I stand, where I feel confident, but this market has just been super resilient, and you can't knock down the price when it keeps going up because it will continue to keep going up. So just a matter of just staying strong going into the end of this quarter. But we can jump in the charts in a little bit. What are you looking towards for how this is going to end out? Because I actually have no idea how this week's going to play.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of a calmer week earlier on as we wait for some of this data to come out. It's still, everything is just focused on the Fed rate. We're seeing a lot of issues over in Europe with the European economy. It's pretty rough. Like, the US seems like it's in better shape right now. A lot of the emerging markets that we saw some strength coming into are starting to pull back as well, just because of this uncertainty. Those emerging markets need the bigger markets to be strong in order for them to have a chance. And if that's not the case, they're going to get hit, exorbitantly harder. Like I kind of look at some of these different economies, like the the blue chip crypto coins or the blue chip stocks versus the more volatile ones. Like they have higher upside in good times and much higher downside in bad times. So that's going to be interesting to watch there. The news on Ford last week caught my attention. I've been looking a lot at electric vehicles. We just got solar panels here at my house, and I just got my first electric bill since the solar panels got turned on, and I'm quite happy with our electric bill got like cut in half once we got those solar panels turned on, which is pretty awesome. Like I will gladly take that, especially heading into a hot summer. So I'm looking at some of these different alternative energy stocks and how that might move going forward. I've seen a lot more people out there pounding the pavement I had someone come to my house last night at 7:30 p.m. Talking to me about solar. I'm like, hey guys, the panels are already up there. Why are you bothering me at 7:30 at night? Like, what are we doing? But that's beyond the point. There's, I think, a lot of potential there as well. I think more and more people are going to get into alternative energy, get solar panels, get electric vehicles, get, the panels on the house, you get a charging port in your garage, bing, bang, boom, you're feeling good. So that to me is really interesting. And we got that news out of Ford last week that they are receiving, I believe, $9.2 billion from the U.S. government from the Inflation Reduction Act to build 3 factories in Tennessee and Kentucky to try to catch up with China and everything they're doing with electric vehicles. So that has definitely got my attention there. Ford stock is one that I hold a little bit of in my portfolio. We saw it, take a little bit of a bounce up, a 2% movement on Thursday on the 22nd when that news came out. What was that, Wednesday? So, or no, Thursday. We've seen, look at their chart. Their all-time high was, the mid 30s, and that was back in 1999. They saw a high during 2022 of about, where was that? $26 a share. So I think there is some upside for Ford. I believe they pay a pretty solid dividend as well. So I'm all for people getting, quality dividend stocks right now as well. Like just get something that if you want to hold for the long term and get a little bit of cash coming in each quarter that you can then roll into more of that stocks, like that's another way to accumulate assets. So looking at Ford as a potential buy, although Jim Cramer was out there test driving their stuff and saying positive things. So that has me a little bit worried. I don't want to be on the same side as Jim Cramer here, but we can jump into some of the charts as we enter this final week of June, last week of Q2. We can keep it kind of simple on this one because I don't think since our show Friday, there's a ton to discuss, but there are some things to look at for sure.
Definitely. I totally agree. Did you happen to see the Jim Cramer? I think Jim Cramer tweeted about Wagner in Russia. And he's like, you have my full support. And like 5 minutes later, the coup was over.
It's over.
It was over. I love this guy.
No one can call the end of a coup quite like, I mean, he can be the reverse of everything. Like I bet I can't even pronounce his last name, but the guy who was leading it was like, oh no, I'm done. I can't do this. if we're getting the Jim Cramer approval, we already know that we're all dead before we get to Moscow. So that was probably the smart move.
Yeah, Jim Cramer, thanks for the heads up. This is the Bitcoin USDT pairing. This is Binance that we're using, and there's a reason why I want to use Binance for today. I use it all the time too, but it's just because there's so much money on Binance, still the biggest exchange. So if we're looking at this, we're still in the supply zone, right? We broke right through it. We're just trading in it. We're kind of making this curved off like top. That's not necessarily the greatest for a bullish continuation. Could it potentially go up more? Yeah, absolutely. But there's a reason why I think it potentially could go up more. It's not necessarily technical. It's more of what I'm seeing, on chain and a lot of other data. So I just want to look back here and just point out a few things. This red line here, which is, I'm going to make this a little bit thicker. This is, right around the time that the SEC decided to sue Paxos, and Paxos was the issuer of BUSD, right? So that's when, we're seeing tons of price being pushed up from January all the way to February. A lot of it likely was BUSD. I think a lot of people understand that. But then we're going to go over to March of 2023. We're getting, at Silicon Valley Bank, we collapsed down to about 19.6. And we start to see this push up. But right here, we saw a huge jump in the market cap for TUSD. And TUSD is, I believe it's the Tron-based stablecoin. It's also on BNB chain, and it is the one that Justin Sun and now CZ are deciding to use a lot more now. CZ, like we talked about on Friday, they made the stablecoin fees non-existent. So we saw the price push up here on Bitcoin back in March. And again, that's not really surprising because Silicon Valley Bank, right? But we do see that we did create a couple of gaps here. We created one here, created one here, created one here. So that's 3 gaps that we have not retested since, but they shot up. And we continue to see the price push up, right? And we know that since SEC sued Paxos, they can't issue any more BUSD because it's an unregistered security. But on Thursday, June 15th, we saw that Binance minted $1 billion worth of True USD, right? And what happened later that day? So this is the 15th, this yellow line right here. And then on the 16th, we start to see the price push up, push up, push up. And since that, we have been up, say, to the height of it, 26% on Bitcoin since that money was injected. Now, necessarily, this isn't something that we need to be too worried about. $1 billion isn't necessarily a ton compared to how much the market cap of Bitcoin increased since
I
the
wish
15th.
I could print $1 billion.
Yeah, especially when you don't necessarily need to have the actual reserves inside the the treasury. It's definitely useful. But 27%, obviously, the market cap shot up for crypto, and we're up 130 billion. But for that day that we pushed up, we are only up about, what is this? We are up about $5 billion. So, yeah, $5 billion that we closed up the next day. So obviously 1/5 of that move the next day was considerably. It could have been Binance. They could have been pumping in at swap orders, pushing the price up. It's very possible, but it's once again coincidence. It just seems that it's very coincidental that the day prior to the pump, we see $1 billion printed at Binance when we know that they don't have necessarily the same stable coin, like BUSD at their disposal. So True USD is something that I'm definitely keeping an eye on, especially as we go into Q3. If I pull up True USD real quick, you're going to see some kind of weird stuff again. So back here is when Paxos got sued by the SEC. And if I remove this white line real quick, you can see that there's a massive gap between here and there. It's a 53% jump in market cap. So that means that much money was printed. And then if we look again over here, this yellow line is June 14th, which is, we don't have data for June 15th, but this is June 14th. And we see this massive gap once again between here and then where we shot up to the next time that this closed on the daily. So this was another 50% jump in market cap for True USD. This is a stable coin that's pretty much came out of nowhere. It's been around for 2 years, but recently we started to see a lot of it shoot up. So for me, I think a lot of what we're seeing on the Bitcoin charts over here, why we're creating so many gaps, both not only on the daily, but if we look at the 4-hourly, we haven't tested any of this, right? This is not a structure that I want to see where I think it's going to be sustainable, because obviously we need to shoot up, build some support. If we build support and we don't go back down, obviously go up again. Here we're just seeing these massive straight pushes up. Like, this makes more sense to me why the price push up. This tells me that this is more consumer based than it is retail based, as opposed to institutional based, where let me see if I can find this. Do this right here. Yeah, this 100% is retail based, by this price pushed up because we're finding support, and then we just get another leg up. This right here, where there's absolutely just nonstop buying, that to me just reeks of institutional money pushing the price up in the direction that they want to. We also knew that a lot of people were shorting down to 25K. We also know that this is a supply zone for people who didn't sell earlier at 31,000 when we hit that back in April. So this is a lot of things that are adding up, right? This is something that we need to keep an eye on, and we need to, there's going to be a point where they're not going to be able to print so much money. Whether the SEC goes after, you would think, but the SEC and Binance, everyone's picking a side here. I think you can, I think both people can be wrong in a situation, right? They could be doing something wrong, and then obviously there could be corruption at the federal level. It's our history. It's part of our history. But if we look at this here, it's like, I'm not seeing the structures that are sustainable on. Well, let's look at the 1 day. On the daily, that's telling me that we're going to come down here and find some support, unless we're using support back here. I do think that it's possible that we could push up a little bit, but we've shot up so much so fast on low volume. Volume's absolutely low down here. And if we look at the stochastic RSI, we're completely overbought, right? We've been at 100 for the past 5 days, 6 days. So that's not necessarily something that I'm bullish on. And if we look at the weekly, obviously the weekly's coming down, but we shot up so much in the weekly. This is probably in a rebound up here. Wouldn't be surprised if we're overbought on the weekly fairly soon. So maybe not this week, after the close. Maybe next week we start to see that completely overbought. And then the big one for me is the monthly. That's obviously, Friday, I believe, is the monthly close for crypto as well. We can see, let me just erase some of these Binance.
These lines, Kevin.
Hey, I cleaned this up for you guys. This was way worse when I opened this chart last night. So be happy. Be happy you can see what I'm talking about. But monthly is almost overbought for crypto, right? And we're in a supply zone right now, local top. Been shooting up like crazy. And there's also this situation, right? This is possible what it is. We could say that, I could be bullish on Bitcoin and say that we shot 5 waves up from the beginning of crypto to 2021, right? It's very possible. I don't necessarily disagree with that. My main concern is if we do go up 5 waves, we have to come down 3 in a corrective pattern. And with that corrective pattern, if we're looking at this be, from 69K all the way down to 15K, up to 32, 33K, where we're, pretty close to right now. And then we come back down to, the 10K levels. That'd be 3 waves, 1, 2, 3. And this is on a macro level. And it's good to keep this in mind because the monthly is overbought. We have low volumes over these past few months that we've been shooting up. And we're finding resistance right now on monthly chart. It's definitely something you want to keep an eye on going into Q3. Maybe we do find a local top here and we start to come down. Maybe we have a little bit more to go. But for the most part, if this structure does hold, 10K is not out of the realm of possibility. And again, maybe you see the BlackRock and the ETF and all.
It's not going to 10K.
Here's the thing with that. I get it. Like the price is really high right now, and a lot of people don't necessarily believe that could happen. But ignorance is a son of a bitch, and you will be humbled by this market, even if you have this slight level of ignorance of like, oh no, that could never happen. Use me for an example. I thought that we were done at 31K, but CZ said no. Fuck Kevin. We're gonna screw him over here. And he just printed $1 billion in spite of me and then pushed the price up. But no, for real, this market goes both ways. It can humble people, it's going to liquidate in both directions. But the most important thing to do is always think macro. So when I look back at this chart, I sit here and I look at where we are with Bitcoin dominance. I look at where the alts are compared to how Bitcoin's been performing. I'm obviously sitting in alt shorts right now. I don't necessarily feel, I feel pretty confident and I feel safe being in this position, looking at the macro, because I do think that we aren't done with a lot of this. I think this still has some continuation. I think that we've put in, the 6 month, this is a corrective pattern. Obviously, we put in a year of downward since, went from November all the way to December, where we just saw, blood, right? 5 waves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 waves perfectly down. Now we get 1, 2, 3 up, 5 waves down. Does it have to be as drastic as this? No, but it's definitely possible that we do test some of these, earlier levels of support that we got back here. 11K, obviously you got a double tap there. I mean, you could even come down as low as, I'm not going to say 6, 7K because I
stop it, Kevin. Stop.
I said I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. But I'm definitely saying that there is going to be a corrective pattern, in my opinion. I think that a lot of what's going on here with the price pushing up is just making it even worse. Imagine if we find out that Binance has been artificially pushing up the market, right? Forget BNB. BNB, I'm not even worried about at this point. I think the one thing that these exchanges need more than anything is volume, right? They need people to be on the platform trading, losing, to be liquidated. They need cash flowing in and out. It doesn't necessarily matter what the price of Bitcoin goes. It can go up or down. They can make money either way. But I think they just need as many people as possible to get in. They know that people won't get in if the prices are low. For some reason, human psychology, people want to buy when it's really high, right? That's when people start pulling in, they're afraid. But that also means that there's transactions going on. They're going to start pulling fees from altcoins because people start saying, oh, you know what? Let me get into altcoins. So now they buy, they have to pay a fee. And then when they lose, they have to pay a fee too. So offering, some free, Bitcoin trading fees like Binance US was doing for a while. Ethereum, they did for a month too. That just incentivized people to get into it. And they did it at the worst possible times in the market because they needed the price to push up. And for the fact that they're just trying to drive liquidity and drive, volume into the markets, but they're not seeing it, it tells me that we're going to be at a place where they could possibly push it up just a little bit more to start getting more people in. But the macro is telling me that we need to go down. We're going to be overbought on the monthly come this, the end of June. And, we can stay overbought and the price could push down completely. We can stay overbought and the price could go sideways. We can stay overbought and keep going up, right? It can be any of those situations, but for the most part we're overbought, needs to come down if we're living in a world where reality exists. I know we haven't been doing that,
but we're not. We're living in it. We're living in a simulation, Kevin. So nothing is real.
So, in my opinion, I have no fear going into what's happening in Q3 with crypto. I think a lot of what we need to keep an eye on depends on also the total market cap. This is the last thing we'll look at today. Bitcoin dominance, obviously, I think it will shoot up whether the price of Bitcoin goes up or down. But we see that total market cap is, is probably going to go towards the overbought. It's going to be extremely overbought pretty soon, maybe in the next 2 months. But for the most part, we can see that the volumes are coming down as the price pushing up. We're in a bear flag. And if we even go down to, let's go to the daily. I mean, it's a head and shoulders pattern right here. Obviously, we're putting in the right shoulder now faster than I expected, and the daily is completely overbought. So we are going to have to come down. If we lose this parallel channel, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we get to a point where Bitcoin's market cap stays relatively the same, but alt absolutely bleed, right? It's very possible. We could just see an exodus of altcoin market caps just absolutely tank. We can also see Bitcoin just drag, everything down. We are overbought on the daily for Bitcoin, not necessarily the weekly, but we will be on the monthly. So a lot of things need to line up. I think that the weekly could potentially stay, overbought or climb to overbought. It's going to take maybe 2-3 weeks possibly. But for the most part, I think that if we're looking at, the monthly, the macro, we're due for a correction. And I do expect it to be massive, just based off that simple correction that we looked on the macro for Bitcoin. So just keep an eye on that. Total market cap, definitely keep an eye on as well, because this is definitely one that I think will give the game away if we are talking about how to start Q3.
Okay. I think that is a good place to wrap up our first show of the week. We'll be back all week. This show is coming out on Monday. We'll be back live. Kevin is going to be back from his houseboat. So we'll be back to our regular time. Tuesday through Friday, we'll be live at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a lot of fun. Excited to get back into the chat, have some of you guys join us, chop it up. Our regulars, Ace, Randy, Mr. House, Bundy, if you're coming through, Mark, Mr. Schmeck are one of our newest regulars. We appreciate that. So thank you, everybody, for watching. You guys really are the best. Like we love doing the show, and a big part of it is getting to interact with you. So if you have not yet, hit some buttons down below, like, subscribe, drop a comment on the video. It helps with the algorithm. And the biggest one of all, if you want to give us an early Christmas present, hit that share button, blast us out on social media. We really appreciate it. So thank you, everyone, for watching once again. We'll be back on Tuesday live. Have an awesome rest of your Monday, and we'll see you soon.
Take care, everyone.